Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into the weeds on something fundamental, maybe even a bit broken, in the business world: legal contracts. Our goal here is to dissect the deep-seated issues you find baked into these documents, things like ambiguity, complexity, even outright contradictions. And crucially, we want to explore how artificial intelligence is stepping in, right now, as a potentially revolutionary solution. You really have to start with the money, don't you? Because this isn't just theoretical, it's a huge drain. I mean, think about a typical complex contract, maybe 300 pages. Manually reviewing that, you're looking at 30, maybe 45 billable hours, easily. And even if you use a, let's say, conservative rate, $300 an hour, that's $9,000 to over $13,000, just to understand the document. And we know top firms charge much, much more. That figure can skyrocket.
It absolutely can. And that cost, it's not just about paying for someone's time. It's the cost of hitting, well, human cognitive limits. We talk about the cognitive field of view. Basically, how much information can one person realistically track? The old way, the manual way, it's just incredibly slow. It's expensive. And frankly, it's overwhelming. You have legal pros trying to juggle hundreds of clauses, cross-references. It's a huge mental load, even for the best lawyers.
That term cognitive field of view, I think that really captures it. It makes you think, are you paying someone $500 an hour to essentially do a fancy search function?
Yeah.
Why are we still doing it this way? How can anyone, no matter how sharp they are, reliably spot that one conflicting clause on page 215 that completely guts something agreed way back on page 38?
It's not sustainable. And honestly, it goes against what we know about how our brains handle large amounts of information. If you look at classic cognitive psychology, like Miller's work back in the 50s.
The 7 plus or minus 2 idea.
Exactly. Our working memory holds maybe 5 to 9 distinct items effectively. Now, that's old research, sure, but the principle holds. When a lawyer faces hundreds of variables, dependencies, potential pitfalls in a contract, their effective field of view just shrinks. Then you add real-world pressures, deadlines, stress, just interruptions in the office, and the risk of missing something critical, some kind of gotcha clause, it goes way up. It's almost built into the process because of human limitations.
Okay, so let's break down the big 3 problems this creates. First, you mentioned ambiguity. This is when terms are just fuzzy. They lack a clear, precise meaning. And that obviously opens the door to disagreements down the line. Totally understandable disagreements, but costly ones.
Yeah, and we see this all the time, right? Like, a contract says you need to give reasonable notice. What on earth is reasonable? A week? A month? 6 months?
Depends entirely on the context and who you ask.
Or another classic, payment is due upon satisfactory completion of services. Satisfactory according to whom? The client, their boss. Some undefined standard. Precisely. And sometimes it's even intentional fuzziness, like using phrases like including but not limited to when defining scope. It sounds comprehensive, but actually injects uncertainty.
And that lack of precision, that linguistic sloppiness, it leads directly to disputes.
Oh, absolutely. You see landmark cases built on this stuff, like the Codelpha construction case in Australia back in '82. Huge disputes over project scope and delays, all stemming from unclear language. But it's broader than just lawsuits. Think about the operational side.
How so?
Well, when contracts are written in dense legalese, who actually understands them day to day?
Only the lawyers, usually.
Exactly. So it excludes the people who actually need to implement the contract, the operations teams, finance, procurement. They can't easily grasp their obligations because the document isn't written for them. It's written for other lawyers.
Okay, so the system's slow, it's pricey, it's prone to human error. Now let's bring in the AI. You're saying this is the game changer. If human capacity is finite, prone to fatigue, AI offers, what, an unbounded cognitive capacity? Doesn't get tired, doesn't need coffee breaks.
That's the fundamental shift. AI isn't just reading the words, it's mapping the relationships between them across the entire document instantly. It can cross-reference every single point against potentially millions of other contracts, identifying risks, flagging ambiguities, spotting contradictions, all without getting mentally exhausted. And the numbers really tell the story. Remember that 30 to 45 hours for a manual review of our 300-page example.
Yeah.
Advanced AI can do a comprehensive first-pass analysis, basically creating a risk map of the whole document in about an hour.
1 hour. Seriously. From 45 hours down to 1.
Roughly, yes, for that initial deep analytical pass.
Okay, that's huge. So if the AI does the heavy lifting, the initial reading and mapping, what's left for the lawyer? What's their role now?
Their role shifts completely. It moves from that laborious, time-consuming search, call it grunt work, to high-level strategic review. Instead of 30-plus hours digging through texts, they spend maybe 3 to 6 hours analyzing the AI's findings, focusing on the flagged issues, planning negotiation strategy.
So the total cost, it drops dramatically.
Dramatically. That $9,000 to $13,500 range we talked about, it could potentially fall to somewhere between $900 and $1,800.
Wow. Okay, so that's like an 80% cost reduction for the client per contract. That's massive savings between, what, $7,000 and nearly $12,000?
That's the potential, yes.
But what does that mean for the law firms? If they're billing fewer hours per contract, are they just making less money?
That's the fascinating part. It's not about replacing lawyers, it's about supercharging them. Think of the AI as the ultimate paralegal. A lawyer who could maybe handle, say, 5 or several complex contracts a month before might now have the capacity to oversee and finalize 20 or 30 in the same amount of time.
So a potential fourfold increase in volume.
Potentially, yes. Their value shifts. They're not billing for searching anymore. They're billing for strategic insight, for negotiation skill, for maximizing the client's outcome.
That makes sense. Shifting from finding the needle in the haystack to deciding what to do with the needle once it's found. But there's a potential issue there, right?
What's that?
How do we make sure firms actually pass those savings on? Couldn't they just keep billing high rates for fewer hours and pocket the difference?
That's the market dynamic playing out right now. It's a real business challenge for the profession, but ultimately competition tends to drive value. When firm A starts offering faster AI-assisted reviews at a lower fixed price, firm B has to respond, or they lose clients.
So the market forces the change.
And what firms are finding is that client satisfaction goes through the roof. Faster turnaround, lower cost, fewer disputes later. It becomes a powerful competitive advantage, not just a cost-saving measure internally.
Okay, so the tech is there. It makes things clearer, faster, cheaper. So why hasn't everything changed already? Why are we still seeing these incredibly dense, jargon-filled contracts? That 66-word indemnity clause you mentioned.
Yeah, well, it's largely down to inertia, really, and maybe some infrastructure issues. Law firms have spent decades building up libraries of standard clauses. They're dense, maybe overly complex, but they've been tested in court. Ripping that all out and rewriting it in plain language, that's a big undertaking.
And maybe complexity was useful, a bit of a moat. If it's confusing, the client has to call the lawyer.
There's probably an element of that historically, yes. It ensured billable hours.
But there's a pushback now, right? This plain language movement.
Absolutely. It's gaining traction globally. Governments in places like Canada, Australia, the UK, Sweden, they're actively pushing for clearer, more accessible legal documents, making law understandable for everyone involved, not just the lawyers.
And there's that great example from Harvard Business Review with GE Aviation.
Oh, yeah, that's a fantastic case study. They looked at their digital services contracts, which were apparently causing huge delays because they were so complex. They had this standard indemnity clause, 66 words of pure legalese. Took ages to negotiate.
Right, and they rewrote it.
They did. Applied plain language principles. Boiled it down to the core legal meaning. The new version was just 23 words.
What did it say?
Something like, supplier protects GE from any claim brought by a third party alleging harm caused by the supplier's product or service. Simple, direct.
And the results were?
Stunning. Contract negotiation time dropped by 60%. 60! Think about how much faster that makes the sales cycle.
Wow.
And maybe even more importantly, after they switched to the plain language version, they had 0 disputes over the wording of that clause. None.
So clarity didn't weaken it legally? It actually made it stronger, more effective?
Exactly. It enhanced understanding and enforceability because everyone knew what it meant.
And you can imagine the ripple effects, right? Training sales teams, getting internal approvals. If the document itself is clear, all that gets faster too.
Absolutely. Every stakeholder benefits.
Yeah.
Quicker onboarding, less time needed to explain risks internally, faster sign-offs because the key points aren't buried. The contract becomes a tool, a guide, not a barrier.
Now, when we talk about these AI tools, you mentioned Stretch and Analytics in the research. You're clear these aren't just glorified search engines or simple chatbots. What makes them different?
It's about understanding context and relationships, not just keywords. Tools like that don't just read the text, they build a kind of map, a relational database of the entire contract. They understand that Clause 5 about termination might interact with Clause 18 about liability, and how both are affected by the governing law defined elsewhere. It's a much deeper analysis.
Okay.
And they use sophisticated techniques. We're talking about very long, detailed prompts, sometimes over 8,000 characters, to give the AI deep context. And crucially, they use something called chain of thought, or CoAT reasoning.
Chain of thought. What's that?
It basically forces the AI to show it's working. It has to explain the logical steps it took to reach a conclusion, why it flagged an ambiguity, or how two clauses contradict each other. It provides transparency, an audit trail, rather than just spitting out an answer.
And that focus on contradictions seems key. A human might spot an obvious clash, but what about the subtle ones, the ones that creep in when different people draft different sections at different times?
That's where AI really shines. You often see it in things like IP rights or responsibility clauses. For instance, Clause 5 might say the vendor gets exclusive rights to all data generated, but then Clause 18, maybe added later, says the client retains full ownership of all project data.
Ah, mutually exclusive.
Exactly. On paper, both look fine in isolation, but together, they guarantee a fight later on. And AI doing relational analysis spots that functional incompatibility immediately.
Let's bring this back to the human element again. We've talked risk, cost, but what about the lawyers themselves, their well-being? Removing this cognitive load must make the job, well, better.
I think it does, significantly. There's a known link between dealing with constant ambiguity and professional stress. It's documented in high-stakes fields like medicine, and law is no different. People who need clarity, who have a low tolerance for ambiguity, they tend to experience more stress, higher burnout rates when faced with complex, unclear situations day in, day out.
So instead of spending 30 hours scanning, worrying about missing that one hidden liability.
Right. Instead of that constant hypervigilance, that fear of missing the million-dollar mistake buried somewhere, the lawyer spends a focused 3 hours acting strategically on the information the AI has surfaced. They shift from just searching to actual strategizing.
And as you said, courts might try to patch things up later if there's a contradiction, try to figure out what the parties really meant.
Sure, they try to reconcile conflicting clauses,
Yeah.
but the AI analysis prevents that conflict from ever getting to a courtroom. It moves legal work from being reactive fixing problems after they happen to being proactive preventing them in the first place.
This has been really illuminating. I feel like a core message is pretty clear. Unambiguous, well-drafted contracts are vital for fair and efficient business. And the tools to actually achieve that are here now. AI isn't about replacing lawyers, it's about augmenting them, revolutionizing how the work gets done.
Exactly. The path forward seems clear. Firms really need to embrace plain language, commit to comprehensive reviews, using AI to go beyond what humans can reliably check and integrate these advanced drafting and analysis tools into their workflow. It's really a choice. Do you want to scale intelligence and precision, or keep scaling the inherent inefficiency of manual billable hours?
So we'll leave you, our listeners, with a final thought to chew on. If firms using AI can potentially handle 4 times the contract volume/negotiation times, boost client happiness, and cut disputes significantly, maybe by 60%, like in the GE case, what does the future hold for competitors who stick to the old ways? What happens when one firm scales intelligence while another just keeps scaling billable hours tied to those unavoidable human limits, that cognitive field of view? It feels less like a competitive question and maybe more existential.
This podcast is brought to you by TrueClaritySoftware.com. Visit us on the web.